Real 92.3 Big Boys Neighborhood. Your girl Ayyde here with my fellow fierce Mexican-American queen. Bienvenida, Carmen Perez.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm really happy to be here. I grew up listening to Big Boy in the morning, and so to be here at the radio station is truly an honor. I mean, I was just a little girl from Oxnard, going to high school, putting it on the radio station, and so it's kind of nice to be home.
You made it. I'm glad to have you here in LA. I'm super excited to get to talk to you. You do so much, and I don't want to mess this up. I literally had to write all of this down, and I try to put it in a nutshell. You've dedicated 20 plus years to advocate for many of today's civil rights, like mass incarceration, gender equality, violence prevention, and so much more. You're the co-chair of the Women's March, which was amazing, co-founder of the Justice League NYC, and now you said you started something else here in California.
Yeah, I'm the founder of Justice League California. We wanted to expand our efforts back to Cali, especially because California is home. I currently work for Harry Belafonte. I've been with him for 13 years. And so being in New York with him and getting taught and mentored by him is huge. But also I wanted to come back home and give something back to my community. My family is personally impacted by incarceration as well as gangs and violence. And so I can't do this work all over the world and not come back home to Oxnard and do something. So in October, we had a conference called Growing Up Lockdown, developed a task force, and we're still recruiting people. We want people who have a lot of heart. You could teach criminal justice reform, but you can't teach heart.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Can you tell a little bit of what exactly the Justice League is and what it does? What does it provide?
So Justice League New York City, and it's very similar to what we're trying to model here in Cali, is a task force of formerly incarcerated individuals, people who have been victims of violence, or directors, film directors, communication directors, just anybody who cares about the issue of stopping mass incarceration or even child incarceration. We have Immortal Technique, who's a hip-hop artist. We have My Son, who's a hip-hop artist. So we have a bunch of people, and we come together and build collective power. And we identify issues that impact our communities and really target those. Right now, New York City, New York and North Carolina are only two states in the U.S. that automatically prosecute 16-year-olds as adults.
Wow.
What does that mean? Is if you go out and you get into a fight at school, you are automatically placed at an adult facility where you are then exposed to violence, not only by your peers, but also the people that are supposed to protect you. You also are 33 times more likely to commit suicide as a young person in an adult facility. And obviously we know that when you are placed in a environment that has 100% violence, you're going to adapt to that environment. And so for us, we're working on a campaign called Raise the Age right now in New York State, so that we could make sure that 16-year-olds get placed in family court and receive the services they need in order to really go back into their communities and thrive.
Right. So let me get this straight. So in New York, there aren't any juvenile facilities. There's just... There you go. For example, the story of Khalif Browder, which is being seen across the nation right now for many people that weren't familiar, are getting familiar. And his story, just like you said, resulted in suicide. And that was even after his release, which is a very, very sad thing, And I feel like a lot of people don't realize that children do not belong with adult criminals, especially for children that really aren't criminals.
Right.
You did speak about how you got involved because of your family. I would like you to share a little bit more about that, just because I personally have a similar story. I just kind of want to hear yours.
Yeah, no, of course. When I was growing up, I grew up in Oxnard, and there was a lot of gangs and violence. And fortunately for me, I grew up playing basketball, and I had a coach that allowed me to kind of channel my anger on the court. I remember when we would come to practice, I would be angry. I had a lot of anger issues because there was a lot of domestic violence happening in my home, or even crossing the street. There's a lot of things that were happening down the block, shootings. And so I was able to channel what I was experiencing at the time through basketball, and then softball, and then track, and then hip hop. And so I grew up thinking that my culture was hip hop and basketball. And I know that because of that outlet, I was able to not get caught up in what was happening in my community. At the age of 16, I was sidestepping a little bit. My family does have a history with gangs. And so, you know, you kind of, it's in your environment, so you just kind of dabble with it a little bit. But when I was about to turn 17, my sister was killed. And her and I were a day apart. She was 2 years older than me, and she was buried on my 17th birthday.
Wow.
And although I had witnessed my brother in and out of jail or family members being sucked up by the system, it really didn't impact me the way it did when she was taken so suddenly.
Right.
And so, you know, for a little bit, I wondered what my life would be. I couldn't see the next day without her, especially because we used to share a room and we shared a lot of things. But, you know, make no mistake, she was my sister. We always fought, right?
Right. Siblings.
Yeah, siblings.
That's what they're there for sometimes.
But after a while, I realized that, you know, I couldn't bring her back. And I had a niece and 2 nephews that were looking at me. And I wanted to be that positive role model for them. And I dedicated my life to ensuring that no girl would ever experience what my sister did. She didn't have the backbone. She didn't have the community. She didn't have the support that I did that allowed me to channel a lot of what I was going through, channel, you know, my baggage into gifts. And so I started creating programs for girls. I went away and studied psychology at UC Santa Cruz. Best thing I could have ever done was leave my environment and heal. And then I started working inside prisons and detention centers, creating positive alternatives to incarceration and working inside prisons using culture and spirituality as a way in order to really tap into the lives of the men and help them transform their lives. And so I've been on this path since I was 19 years old. I just turned 40 on the day of the Women's March on Washington.
You're Pisces.
I'm a
Pisces
cusp.
or Aries. Cusp,
Yeah,
like right on there?
Aquarius, and
Happy belated.
Thank you.
And I'm sure your sister is extremely proud of you and everything that you are doing. And speaking of the Women's March, you are co-chair, and it was amazing. Like, you were at the Washington March. I was here in LA, but it was all over. And literally, like, being there just made you feel so empowered. But at the same time, I was pissed. I was like, yo, like, I'm really out here having to fight right now for something that got started so long ago, all because of the person that's in office right now. And but it also empowered me, and it made me, it's like this bittersweet feeling. It's like, while I was angry, I was also very satisfied and relieved, because it's like, look at all of these people out here. And while many people were trying to say that it was just about, it's like, it wasn't just about women's rights. It was a culmination of everything. If you read the signs and everything that was out there, it was like this very overwhelming sensation and feeling that I was just like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm really proud of what we were able to do on January 21st. I gave my soul to that march. I've been organizing since I was a young person, and so I've gone from organizing locally inside Santa Cruz, working with young people, to then being the national organizing director of the Gathering for Justice, the organization that Mr. Belafonte founded. And I had to go into communities and really meet people where they were and learn, right? So oftentimes, as an organizer, you have to listen. You have to do assessments. You provide, resources and trainings. And so all them years that I went from organizing in Santa Cruz to Little Rock, Arkansas, Chicago, Erie, Pennsylvania, all the places that I've been to, meeting new people, right? Really having to step out of myself as a Mexican-American Chicana woman, going into African-American communities, going into poor white communities, going into API, indigenous communities. You have to really be intentional about your relationships with folks, and how do you create an environment where they have a voice. And so my role within the Women's March was not only to be the national co-chair, but also my organization housed the Women's March on Washington.
Wow.
And I was responsible, along with the woman named Paula Mendoza, who's originally from LA as well.
Wow, that's so
she's
dope.
in New York City, but another Latina. We're responsible for partnerships and also diversity. And a woman by the name of Linda Sarsour, the Muslim American woman who's also a national co-chair. Yeah. So she and I created this policy platform, a process to bring 24 experts. And that's why you see all the different issues, right? Because we as women are not monolithic, right?
Exactly.
We're not just about, I can't think about reproductive justice rights if I'm living in poverty, or my my mom is being deported or my brother is being incarcerated, right? We got to really think about who we are as people, and we are intersectional. You know, I still live in the hood, and I still, you know, have to think about my safety. I still have to think about, you know, how are people going to make the next dollar? And so we were really intentional about thinking about climate change, reproductive justice, and also giving a new face to feminism, right? Back in the day, if you really think about white feminism, it didn't include black women. It didn't include Chicanas. It didn't include a lot of folks. And now we're showing a different face. And that's what we represent as women. And I felt it was my responsibility as a Mexican-American woman in my role as a leader on criminal justice reform or police accountability or movement building to be at the table, because I was not going to be a part of a march where our voices were being left out.
Exactly. You know, speaking of that, I had this conversation with a friend of mine, because although there was a lot of women, to be honest, what we felt that there wasn't enough black and brown. Still, as many women as came out to LA, like, I have to keep it 100. Like, I looked around, I was like, yo, like, this is the problem. Like, we are the voices that need to be heard, and we are the ones that don't come out and don't show up when we need to. It's like, you looked around and we were outnumbered. We truly were. And it just made me really think. It's like, what is it that you don't feel like coming out? What makes you think like, I don't need to be out there as a Latina, as a black woman? Like, what is it? Because we're the ones that want to fight for all of these rights, but it's like, you don't really see our faces out there. But I did see one sign that literally almost brought me to tears. And it was like almost at the end when I was already like walking towards my car. It was these 3 Latinas, and their sign said, "My mother crossed for me, so I'm marching for her." And it literally, like, right now, it's like bringing like chills to my skin, because it's like, that's what I wanted to see. Like, as being a Mexican American and coming from immigrant parents, you know, like, you feel like you're so poorly represented. That's why I was super excited to talk to you, because it's like, I get so motivated and so inspired seeing like a fellow Mexican American. And I'm going to stick to Mexican American and overall Latina, because like with this Trump presidency, like him pinpointing just Mexicans out has made me want to fight back more than ever before, because it's like, well, you're singling us out. Like, you're very ignorant to try to make it seem like we're the only immigrants here in America. Like, we're not. But since you're going to attack us, like, why not fight back? How do you feel that there can be a better voice for Latinos or Latinas here in the United States?
I think what's really interesting about your point, you're right. You're completely 100% right. A lot of Latina and black women didn't show up. And the criticism that we heard from black women is they were not going to be part of a white woman's march.
Right.
And it was the reason why we worked so hard, Tamika Mallory, myself, Linda Sarsour, to be the face, to have the conversation starting at 7 a.m. with the AFL-CIO, 80 people on a conference call till 1 a.m. Our faces plastered on Skype, really trying to make sure that we were able to answer as many people's questions. And we had one-on-ones every single second of my calendar. Again, telling you, I gave my soul to this because of what you're talking about. Number 45, targeting our people, saying that our people were rapists, and me knowing the sacrifices that our people make every single day. The fact that people are going out into the fields and picking our crops. The fact that there are servers, right? And not recognizing that, a lot of these people aren't coming from Mexico.
Exactly.
They're also from the United States. My father's family didn't cross the border. The border crossed him. My mother's from Mexico, but my father's a Chicano man. And they were here, and if you know the history of our people, this used to be our land, and it was taken away from us. And they told us, well, we'll give you citizenship if you give us your land, right? And then you can actually harvest your land. Well, that didn't happen. They gave us citizenship, and then they ended up deporting us.
Exactly.
And in 1930, they deported us. They deported about 2-point-something million people that were Mexican citizens and Mexican residents, right? And then they deported us again under Operation Wetback. And so it's constant government interruption, right, when it comes to our people becoming elevated and doing the right thing. And so I'm tired of that. And that's the reason why I felt I run a national organization. I didn't need a job. I did my full-time job as an executive director of Harry Belafonte's organization, of running 2 task force, Justice League California, Justice League New York City, and then on top of that, the march. And it was important for me to do that and sacrifice every minute that I had, was because it's not necessarily about the people that are on the sideline sidelines criticizing. It's about me creating opportunities for young women to see themselves in roles of leadership, because I didn't have that.
Exactly.
Right.
It's so interesting that you said that, because I got the opportunity to go sit down to celebrate and honor Cesar Chavez and his legacy. And while I was there, a lot of people were speaking about him and his wife and everything that he did. And I was sitting down and I was like, I can't sit here and name anybody besides Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta that have really made an impact or had that voice be heard in whatever form it has been, that really I can't sit here and give you more than 2 names. And it's 2017. It's what is it going to take? And as far as Latinos go in a more general scope of things, I feel like there's so many layers to us Latinos that it's hard to form one voice. And I hate to admit this, but I feel that as Latinos, we don't know how to come together. We don't know how to just be one because of those different layers, because we're from so many different places. But we love to criticize, and that drives me wild. For example, at the Women's March, my sign had many causes or reasons why I was there on them. And one of them was Black Lives Matter. And I got into it with a friend of mine because she's like, what about brown lives? I was like, what about?
They matter. Yeah, brown lives matter. Once Black Lives Matter, every life matters.
Exactly.
And that's what people don't understand. Again, I'm part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and people criticize me and say, well, you're Chicana, you're Mexican American, you're Latina. Why do you care? Well, it's because I've traveled across the world. And when I went to Cuba, and when I went to Venezuela, when I went to Mexico, when I went to Germany, I also saw that Black people were still at the bottom, and they were being killed at the hands of police, state violence, right? And so, yes, brown lives matter. I agree. But once Black people are free, then our people will be free.
Exactly. That's what I was
around the
trying
world.
to
Let's talk about the diaspora. Let's keep it a buck. There's something that's called the erasure of Blackness. And the fact that just recently we've actually identified and have put it on the census that there are Afro-Mexicanos, right, that hadn't been counted for years, is called the erasure of Blackness. And so I agree with our brown brothers and sisters. I will fight along for them, and I will.
Definitely.
But at the same token, we also need to educate ourselves. And it's so beautiful to work with somebody like a Harry Belafonte that gives me a historical analysis of what happened in the 1960s, of what happened in the 1800s, so that I can know why we're still going through this. You said it earlier, 2017, we're having a fight against this misogynistic, racist president by the name of number 45, right? And nothing's new, though. We talk about deportations. This has been happening, right?
He ain't the only president.
In 2007, I remember being able to travel to Tecate freely. That's where some of my family is. And now you have to wait 3 hours in the border. And so again, it's about naming these issues, but also not standing on the sidelines. And I'm not about standing on the sidelines. I played ball. I wanted to win championships. And so that I keep my eyes on the prize, and it's about winning and bringing everybody into the fold and creating entry points for people to get involved, and not shaming people for not knowing, but also having the patience to talk to them and change the hearts and minds of people who have never been exposed to something. And again, it's having courageous conversations and actually talking about what is it that you think is going to help change the trajectory of so many lives here in the United States, particularly here in California. I always talk about Cali. I live in New York City, but my beloved California is where my heart is. It's man, I miss the food, I miss the culture, I miss everything. But I also have to go and show other people that we are not monolithic. And it is also my responsibility as a woman to ensure that I also am an example. And you were talking about the leadership of Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez. There was also Corky Gonzalez and Reyes Tijenires, who started the Chicano movement. We don't know about them. We also know about
sitting here
Tony Gonzalez, from the American Indian movement. And there's so many elders. And it's important to understand these different movements, because prior to Dr. King getting killed, he was bringing these movements together. He was bringing Corky Gonzalez together from the Chicano movement and Cesar Chavez from the United Farm Workers movement. the American Indian movement, the Black Liberation movement, right, and the Civil Rights movement together to look at the Poor People's Campaign. And then he ended up getting assassinated, and it wasn't able to then come together after that. And so again, there's this constant interruption from our government that doesn't really allow our people to thrive. And I'm about solutions, and I'm going to continue to create those pathways. I'm going to continue to create entry points, and I'm going to really focus on our young people to ensure that they are the leaders of today, because we constantly talk about they're the leaders of tomorrow, but at the end of the day, they're the present.
Yeah,
and they're the greatest gift, and oftentimes they're left out of the narrative.
And speaking of the narrative and them being left out, I know this is going to cause fire. How do you feel about number 45 cutting programs that, like after school programs and recreational programs that do help the youth of today? Like, how does that make you feel?
I think it's disappointing, and it's again it's a reflection of how people who are making decisions about our communities don't come from our communities, right? So there's this disconnect. And so it's easy for him to say these programs don't exist. We don't need them. They don't help our young people anyways. And I am a product of those programs.
Same.
I'm a product of after school programs. I'm a product of job training and mentorship programs. And because of positive adults in my life, I've been able to change my life and do something positive with it. I could have stayed dwelling in my loss of my sister, dwelling in the fact that we lost so many people in our lives as children to suicide, to violence, to drugs, to incarceration. But because there were people in my life in these programs, I was able to then name and channel a lot of things that I experienced. And so I think, again, one of the things that I really encourage our people, particularly our Latino communities and our Black communities, is to empower yourself and put yourself in a role where you can actually be part of the solution. Go out to, it's not just about these presidential elections. It's about local elections.
Definitely.
Go out. My girl, Wendy Carrillo, went out and ran for Congress, District number 34. I mean, that was courageous. We need Wendy in Congress.
Yeah,
we need people like her who actually come from community, understand, have your finger on the pulse of the movement, but also then be able to change policy. And that's the kind of the work that we do in Justice League is we use different strategies. We use the multi-pronged approach. It's not just about being on the streets.
Right.
It's also about changing policy. It's about training people. It's about organizing. It's about being in community, but showing up. And, if we don't show up, then people are going to make decisions about our communities, and we're going to always be at the bottom.
Yeah, man, you are preaching. Like, I literally could keep going about this. I really want to know, like, what is your ultimate goal? Like, what would make you feel like, there, I did it. This is what I wanted to accomplish. What is that like, Carmen?
Well, being in this field for 20 plus years, I think I've achieved a few goals. But my ultimate goal is to liberate our people. I think about children playing in the streets and having and thriving, and schools letting out, and young people being free of violence, being free of being bullied, being free of being judged. And that to me is creating the beloved community where our children really thrive. But right now, one of my goals is to ensure that we raise the age in New York State of criminal responsibility for 16-year-olds so that we don't lose children like Kalief Browder. Kalief Browder allegedly stole a backpack. Right. And he was sentenced. He wasn't even sentenced. He got taken to Rikers. He was there for 3 years. 2 years were in solitary confinement. He attempted suicide 7 times. He was a victim of rape, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all the type of abuses that you could think of. So I don't want another child to experience that. We could do better as people who are working on juvenile justice reform, criminal justice reform. We could do better. I don't sleep right at night when I leave the detention centers and I know that these young people are not going home. And if they are going home, are they going home to a place where people are telling them that they love them? Right? Like, sometimes our families don't know how to hug us or love us, right? And so I ask people to really go deep into their heart and think about what they would want. And if they could have that, what do they have to do in order to make it happen?
Wow, that is so beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you get out of here. Can you please tell people where they can find you? They can find all about you and follow your journey.
Of course, of course. So you could follow me on Twitter or Instagram at MSLadyJustice1, Miss Lady Justice 1. You could go to our website, gatheringforjustice.org, and also womensmarch.com to get more information around criminal justice issues with the Gathering and Justice League, and then the Women's March. We have actions that are coming out. We're on our 7th action that is going to be released. We have 10 actions within the 100 days of number 45's presidency. But we also need to organize. We need to come together. We need to look at our... We need to stop looking at our differences and really build collective power. And I'm ready. If people are ready to build, I'm ready to build with them.
I love that. I'm going to continue to build with you. This has been real sweet. Real 92.3 Big Boys Neighborhood. Ayyde here with Carmen Perez. Thank you.
Thank you.